What actually makes a perfectly normal human brain turn to hate? Forget the political debates and the endless guesswork. Today in this explainer, we're cutting straight through the noise to look strictly at the hard, psychological science behind what truly drives discriminatory behavior.
It's incredibly easy to assume that racist individuals consciously wake up every morning just wanting to do evil. We picture these cartoon villains plotting malicious deeds. But psychological research reveals a much more complex and, frankly, kind of surprising reality about human nature.
The truth is, they rarely see themselves as villains. No way. Instead of seeing themselves as bad people, many truly believe they're simply protecting their group, stating obvious facts, or defending their own culture. In their minds, they are the heroes of their own story. But here is the catch. How exactly does a perfectly normal, healthy brain get to that point?
Well, to figure that out, we need to look at Section 1, the diagnosis, and dive into the neuroscience of us versus them. Back in the 1970s, a psychologist named Henry Tajfel developed something called social identity theory. It basically proves that our brains naturally divide the world into groups just to make sense of things and, subconsciously, to boost our own self-esteem. It's a totally normal survival mechanism. But when arbitrary categories like race get added to the mix, that normal mechanism morphs into real dangerous prejudice. It happens because we naturally favor our in-group, the us. And at the exact same time, we project our own insecurities and a massive lack of empathy onto the outgroup, the them. This is where people start using stereotypes, labeling entire groups of people as lazy or dangerous. To a biased brain, these aren't even hateful slurs, they are just quick mental shortcuts used to navigate a really complex world.
So, who is actually the most susceptible to this? Science points to some very specific psychological traits. We're talking about things like social dominance orientation, which is basically a preference for strict social rankings, and right-wing authoritarianism, meaning a deep craving for order and a huge fear of outsiders. You combine that with deep personal insecurity and a defensive need to protect a group's image, and boom, you have the perfect storm. But that begs the question, how did this fixed racial hierarchy get built in the very first place?
Let's move to Section 2, the origin story, and unpack this manufactured hierarchy. Get this. Prior to the 1500s, prejudice was based almost entirely on religion or tribe. It wasn't until European exploration that a biological racial hierarchy was literally invented out of thin air. Fast forward to the 1700s and 1800s, and so-called scientific racism was suddenly ranking Europeans at the top and Africans at the bottom. The system just kept evolving, from Jim Crow segregation in the US to Nazi Germany's Holocaust, right through to South Africa's apartheid. Racism as we know it today is a surprisingly modern invention where power structures deliberately rewarded in-group loyalty. It literally led ordinary people to commit horrific acts, all while falsely believing the science backed them up. Which brings us to Section 3, the global picture today, and how bias manages to survive modernity. It survives because it's still a massive issue. According to a 2025 Pew Research study, a global median of 34% of adults say racial discrimination is a very big problem. And those highest concerns? They are heavily concentrated in sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, Turkey, India, and parts of Asia. This isn't just some isolated historical footnote, it is a pressing, everyday global reality. Today, bias survives through clever rationalization. You see, individuals who engage in racism often come from heavily isolated environments with virtually zero intergroup contact. Because of that bubble, they don't even see their actions as racist. Instead, they rely on built-in defensive rationalizations. They claim economic realism, argue they're just protecting local culture, complain about reverse discrimination, or just express a general fear of social change. But here is the most crucial takeaway for us today. Bias is entirely learned. It is absolutely not inevitable. Psychological studies have shockingly revealed that babies start showing own race preferences by just 3 months old. 3 months, and it's based purely on their immediate surroundings. It gets absorbed from family, from media, and from segregated spaces. But hold on, here's the ultimate twist. If it can be learned, it can absolutely be unlearned.
And that brings us to our final section, the cure, where we look at unlearning the habit.
Because racism is a learned habit built on ancient survival wiring, science actually gives us the exact blueprint to dismantle it. The most powerful tool we have is called the intergroup contact hypothesis. Backed by over 500 different studies, it definitively proves that when people from different races have meaningful, real-life interactions, the psychological programming literally breaks down. Anxiety decreases, empathy shoots up, and those faulty mental shortcuts we talked about completely lose their power.
And guess what? We are already seeing incredible, measurable results. Data from the U.S. Project Implicit proves that implicit anti-Black and pro-white bias plummeted by a staggering 26% between 2007 and 2020. That is huge. It proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that the system can be hacked and rewired for the better.
To really accelerate this drop, science points to 4 clear evidence-based steps. Step 1. Prejudice habit-breaking training, which helps you catch biased thoughts in real time before you act on them. Step 2. Enforcing strong desegregation policies. Step 3. Fostering highly diverse education from a young age. And Step 4. Building inherently fair institutions. It takes a 1-2 punch of individual habit changes and massive systemic overhauls to really starve the bias.
We now know, through hard data, that racism is just the product of an ordinary mind shaped by history and systems. That means it is highly malleable. It can be changed, which leaves us with one final vital question. What do you think happens in the racist mind now that you know the science? Take this knowledge, apply it to the spaces and institutions you interact with every single day, and let's go engineer a smarter, fairer world.